Our guest today on Candid Conversation is Richard Verma. The US ambassador to India is the son of immigrant parents who moved from Jalandhar to Canada to the US and made a life from scratch. A lawyer by profession, Verma served as a judge advocate in the US Air Force and as a professional lawyer of repute before being fully associated with activities on Capitol Hill, where he played a key role in support of the Indo-US civil nuclear deal. He served as Assistant Secretary of State for Legislative Affairs under Hillary Clinton in the first Obama administration and has been US Ambassador to India since January 2015.
When I go out and meet young kids who want to study in the United States, who want to do exchange programs, or who at least have potential, I can see the face of my grandmother, my mother, my father, my sisters and brother in their faces.
Hello and welcome to Candid Conversation. Our guest today was considered one of the most important Indian Americans when he was serving in the United States, and he's certainly perhaps the most important Indian American today, the Ambassador of the United States to India, Mr. Richard Verma. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us.
Pleasure to be with you.
Now, well, you've described this relationship, which is now a strategic relationship, as a strategic plus relationship.
Right.
What's this plus factor all about?
I think the plus is to indicate that we are now working in more areas of the world on more subjects than we ever have before. So if we had a strategic partnership for 10 years, we now have something higher. And that's why we were trying to designate, we have a higher zone of cooperation across the board in so many different areas. In fact, Secretary Kerry remarked to me in the fall that we do more with India now on a government-to-government basis than perhaps with any other country. And I think that surprises people when they hear that, but that's what Strategic Plus is about, a way to indicate a higher level of cooperation.
Right, and so there are so many layers of dialogue, and one wonders actually what really comes out of all this, in the sense that, for instance, let's take defense.
Sure.
That should be a key area of the strategic relationship. What's so special about defense currently?
Well, there's a lot special about defense, and in fact, even today, our Chief of Naval Operations is here in India meeting with his counterparts to talk about Navy-to-Navy cooperation. And that's indicative of the kind of high-level visits. I think back to just December when Minister Parkar was the first Indian Defense Minister to go to a combatant command, first Indian Defense Minister to go to Pacific Command, first Indian Defense Minister to land on a U.S. aircraft carrier in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean with our Secretary of Defense. That builds upon Secretary Carter's trip here, where he was the first U.S. Defense Secretary to go to an Indian Naval Command when he went to Vizag. Those visits are symbolic, emblematic of what we've done to come together. We have obviously done a lot in the sales area, but we've gone way beyond buyer-seller relationship. India does more military exercises with the United States than any other country. We now talk about interoperability and jointness in a way that we never would have before. Even in the last year, I look at how we called upon India for help to evacuate U.S. nationals from Yemen. We worked together with India after the Nepal earthquake.
Yes.
So this notion of humanitarian and disaster response, but also now co-production, co-development, and joint research on the most advanced defense products are taking place right here in India. People would be surprised to learn that parts of the President's helicopter, President Obama's helicopter, are made right here in India. Part of the C-130J, this big workhorse of the U.S. and Indian Air Force, made right here in India. That's the future relationship, because we are natural security partners, and that has really shown itself to be true in the last couple of years in particular.
But you've quoted Secretary Carter as saying that the India-U.S. relationship can be the anchor of global security.
Sure. Yeah.
In that sense, I mean, it's more than just co-production, and it's more than the symbolism of people meeting on aircraft carriers. What is the deeper aim?
I think the deeper aim is to uphold the rules-based democratic order that the U.S. and India have defended, protected, upheld since the end of World War II. We are the world's two largest democracies. As the Prime Minister has said many times, when our two countries come together, it has incredible ramifications for peace, security, and prosperity. That's really, I think the overall kind of guiding principle for us. But we're also, as I said, we're both maritime powers. We both have incredible air forces. We have great special forces and armies. So we're also naturally inclined towards each other.
Right.
So there's a lot at play here. And again, we are natural security partners that can really uphold and defend this post-World War II order.
So natural partners because we are big democracies and also promote democracies. And can we say that, the alliances of democracies are sort of working from a strategic point of view to as a counterbalance to the non-democratic powers in the region? Let's say even if we add Japan into the picture.
Yeah, and we've had great cooperation with Japan. Japan took part in our Malabar exercise. I would say it like this. I think we have shared values. I think about our two constitutions start with the same three words, we the people.
Sure.
Again, we protect minority rights. We're constitutional democracies, federal systems. Not every country in the world is aligned like this. And so we are naturally drawn towards each other. There's no question about it. And again, if by coming together, it can have a positive impact on peace, on stability, on the promotion of democracy and rights more broadly, then that's a good thing.
Another area which would come into the strategic domain would be counterterrorism, and the major threats of terrorism, in India at least, emanate from our neighbor Pakistan. And there is the feeling that many of these terrorist groups are promoted by the Pakistan army, at least that's the feeling here in India. And the US has been supportive of dialogue between India and Pakistan all the time, but the dialogue doesn't get very far because there's always an attack. We just saw recently the Pathankot attack. And there is a feeling that, perhaps the US could, through its influence at least, that's what analysts say, tell Pakistan to stop at least terrorism targeted against India.
Right. Look, we've been encouraged by the recent dialogue, and the President has credited the two leaders with coming forward to initiate dialogue in the face of some substantial obstacles, no question about it. We've also been quite clear, President's been quite clear that perpetrators of terrorist attacks have to be held accountable, that these terrorist groups, wherever they operate, cannot have safe haven, cannot have freedom to plan and plot against free people. And so we've also been very clear with the Pakistanis about the need to crack down on groups operating in their territory. And look, the Pakistanis have suffered at the hands of terrorist groups. There's been thousands of victims. There have been victims in India and further. So look, it's in our interest to have a very close partnership with India on counterterrorism, as we do, and we will continue to do so. There's no daylight between us on that. And we have a very good intelligence relationship,
sure,
homeland security relationship, and we have to make it clear that the perpetrators of these attacks must be held accountable. And again, these groups given no room to operate. That's been our message. Will continue to be our message going forward.
So the cooperation in terms of counterterrorism will go from strength to strength. And when we look at the newer threats such as ISIS, and perhaps their influence in this region. After all, India has the largest number of Muslims in the world. And you're also quoted as saying that, the Muslim population of India is peace-loving. Could you elaborate?
Yeah, let me say just a word about ISIS, which is, it's a serious threat, and the President has helped galvanize and lead a global coalition against ISIS and related groups, and we will continue to do that. When we think about areas where that the U.S. and India can cooperate on, it's I think in countering violent extremism, countering the kind of hate-filled messages that are out there on social media, offering an alternative view. And that's an important area for us. I think we can build together. I think we can also, what I've said in the past is I think we can also take some lessons from how India has built an inclusive democratic society, which is also part and parcel of not allowing people to feel as if they're disenfranchised or disaffected and subject to, if not recruitment, but end up on the edges of society. And that's why this kind of democracy that India has built has been so impressive over the years.
Both countries are involved with an economic dialogue as well, and as far as trade is concerned, you have rather large targets. Both countries want to move from $100 billion to $500 billion in a short span of time. What kind of short-term measures need to be put in place for this kind of scaling up?
Sure. So I think this has been a great area of success for both of our countries. When I look at just the two-way trade number 10 years ago, it was around $30 billion. Last year we crossed over $105 billion. And the reason we firmly believe we can get to $500 billion is that right now a very small percentage of our exports come to India, and a very small percentage of Indian exports actually go to the United States. So the potential is huge. And we are so naturally inclined in terms of business partners that there's a really bright future ahead. So what do we have to do, I think, is your question. We have to continue to break down barriers. We have to continue to tackle these ease of doing business indicators, contract sanctity, tax fairness, legal certainty, regulatory burden, all those issues that impact investment decisions and business decisions. We want India to be in a strong place. We want the U.S. to be in a strong place. We want to create opportunities for people in both of our countries at all levels of the economic pyramid, and we've been doing that. But we can certainly do more.
Well, India seeks investments for Make in India, and you've traveled 36 times across the country.
I think at least I've lost track.
You've lost track. And yes, now, so when we look at what you've done, I mean, you've gone and met a lot of people, chief ministers, business leaders. What's the kind of feeling you're getting from all of them? There's this talk now of cooperative federalism in our country in terms of the states, but from business to business leaders itself, what are they actually looking at to bring in investment in the country?
Yeah, and part of the reason I've gone on all these trips is to do exactly that, talk to the chief ministers, talk to both our businesses, Indian businesses, innovators, find out where the challenges still remain. This notion that you mentioned of competitive federalism or cooperative federalism is what we're seeing is the states are really competing for this foreign investment and business as much as the central government might. When we see American business leaders come into India now, they might spend a day in New Delhi and then they are out into the country talking to chief ministers and other government officials. I think of the deal that Google did, for example, in Hyderabad to open the second largest research park outside of the United States. That was a deal essentially done between private sector in America and a state government and state officials. That is the model we're seeing going forward, and I think it's a good development, this race to the top that we're seeing between the states.
Now, you did talk about ease of doing business, and some of the problems that the current government has is that things get blocked in Parliament because government doesn't have a majority in the Rajya Sabha.
Right.
And you're having dialogue at various stages at all levels. Is it possible, to have a parliamentary to parliamentary kind of dialogue, between legislators so that people can actually thrash out these issues and see what's in the best interest of both countries at the legislature level?
Sure, it's a really good question, and I spent a lot of my years working in the U.S. Congress. In fact, I started working in the U.S. House when I was 18 years old, so I have a real appreciation and respect for legislative and parliamentary bodies. I also know, having lived in Washington for the last 20 years, what it's like when the legislative branch is not producing legislation or is fighting with the executive, and that's a normal part of any democracy. And so I can understand. I see so many similarities between Delhi and Washington. Sometimes it's really interesting. But again, what we've seen as reforms in the central government are stalled. We see the states take effort, move certain initiatives forward, whether it's single window clearances or land reform at the state level. And I think there will be further reforms at the central level. We've seen some sectors open. I think additional reforms are coming. Ultimately, India's competing globally against other countries, and so to make India more competitive and to create additional opportunity for the people is really essential. Finally, this notion of parliament to legislative collaboration, I think, would be outstanding. And we have those kinds of arrangements with other parliaments, with Japan, with Australia, with the UK. We would love to pursue something with the Indian Parliament and the US Congress. I think there'd be a lot of interest in that.
Well, there's a lot of collaboration after all, we live in the fourth industrial revolution in terms of digital technologies. Silicon Valley and Bengaluru, for instance, a lot of startups, and now government has started the Startup India campaign, hoping to replicate Google, Facebook. What, in your opinion, needs to be done, for India to have those kind of companies?
Right. I was there in Silicon Valley when the Prime Minister
was there, yes.
Took his visit there, and I think his request to the audiences that he spoke to was, let's bring our best minds together, our innovators from India and the United States, and let's see what we can do to solve today's challenges, whether they're in the health sphere or the environment or in infrastructure or smart cities. Let's use innovation, technology, and the latest advances in science to help leapfrog what might be slower development. Now, the question is, how do you do that? How do you inculcate a startup culture? How do you support young people who want some place to test out their ideas? They may not be, the next Google or the next Microsoft, but maybe they have a great idea that just needs some mentoring, some training, some financial support, and some backing. And I think what the Prime Minister has done with the Startup Initiative is really important. And I think the more collaboration we can get from Silicon Valley and India and Boston and Austin and Chicago and other places, I think we can be a terrific partner in this effort going forward.
One of the concerns is in terms of funding, and at least the American model is through venture capitalists.
Right.
Perhaps there are not too many. Maybe some of our former CEOs of Indian companies, like Ratan Tata, for instance, is investing as a venture capitalist or as an angel investor. But that sort of culture hasn't developed in India.
It will.
It will? You think so?
Oh, there's no question it will. And I think it already is. In fact, some of these trips that I've taken, I've had the good fortune of seeing some of the startup small ventures and some of the ecosystem that has developed around these ventures to support them. But I think you will see more of that. As the middle class grows, as you have more people who want to start businesses, and as frankly as there's a more business-friendly environment, not only to succeed, but to fail. Part of being in the startup culture is that you have to be able to fail and get back up on your feet and try again. And I think you will see more money come out of the private sector, not only from India, but from the United States, from Europe, from other parts of Asia, because ultimately those investors are seeking good ideas, good innovations, again, solutions for tomorrow's problems.
But one of the concerns that they could have, because of most of the business or collaboration that coming in from the United States, is with H-1B visas. Now, for smaller companies, the rates are kind of high. Maybe the larger companies, can easily pay for these sort of visas at $4,000, but the smaller companies may struggle.
Oh, I think the record has been that India gets, 70% of the H-1B visas issued of the total cap, a huge number, the lion's share. And I suspect that will continue. And I think look, I understand there was concern about the fee. This was a provision in a larger budget bill that went through to fund the victims of the attacks of 9/11, to fund health care and other benefits for the families and other victims. So, and I also understand there's a conversation taking place between the companies that were impacted and members of Congress, and we'll just have to see where that goes. But I also know how deep and how strong the technical collaboration is between the United States and India, and I don't see that letting up. In fact, I only see it increasing.
Now, there is a hotline between President Obama and Prime Minister Modi, and it was used before the Paris talks, and there was a lot talked about it. And, when they did go to Paris, there were two initiatives announced. One was the Mission Innovation
right.
and the Solar Alliance.
Right.
Can you fill us in, with the background a little bit?
Yeah. No, I had the great privilege and honor in being in all those meetings between the President and Prime Minister over the last year and couple months, and including in September of last year when they met in New York. And this was about 3 or 4 months before the Paris agreement was to be finalized. And they both said that we intend to be part of the solution, that we may have our differences today, but we are going to be part of a lasting, durable climate agreement. And that's exactly what happened in the end. Now, was it a tough negotiation? Was it hard fought? Did India fight for differentiation in the agreement and financing commitments and intellectual property commitments? They did. Just as we fought to make sure that we had one system of standards that would apply across the board to countries, that there were ambitious commitments on reductions of carbon. So we were able to pull together this incredible agreement. India was a leader, the US was a leader, France, China, so many other countries played a critical role. But yes, the relationship between the President and Prime Minister, the fact that they were able to pick up the phone and talk to each other, not only with their ideas, but with their concerns, right up until just 2 or 3 days before the agreement was finalized, was a very big deal. And I think it was a very important part of coming up with this durable framework. The other two initiatives are also exceptionally important. One is the Mission Innovation, to double the amount of spending on clean energy R&D, not only from about 24 countries, major countries, including the US and India, but also from the billionaires in the United States and elsewhere around the world that put a lot of money on the table to fund clean energy R&D. And then we were very excited with India's proposal to launch the Solar Alliance. So a lot of really interesting and important initiatives, ones that we have never seen before, came out of this interaction between our two countries, and we're really excited about this clean energy pathway ahead.
Sure. And when something really tangible comes out over the long run, perhaps the embassy staff will not want to go back to the U.S. So quickly because of the pollution in Delhi. I mean, there are reports that nobody really wants to stay here.
Look, what I've said about this, and I really believe this, is that this is not just a concern of the embassy staff or U.S. government employees. This is a problem that people in New Delhi and other cities in India that face air pollution, it's a serious health concern. It's one of the leading causes of illness and premature death. The fact is, we've also lived through this kind of pollution in the United States. And through regulation, through incentives, through technology, we've been able to bring air and water pollution way down to very manageable levels.
Sure.
And so we're in a very good dialogue with our counterparts here in India to share our experiences. But look, it's as I've said before, it is a concern for the people that live here broadly. And we want to be doing something to help solve the problem.
Being a person of Indian origin yourself, what sort of advice would you give to Indians who seek to go abroad and try and become, let's say, global citizens?
Oh, it's a really good question. What I'm seeing increasingly is Indians that go abroad, whether it's to the United States or to Europe, are increasingly coming back to India. I just say, look, we're living in an unprecedented time of discovery, of innovation, of scientific development, of changes in our energy usage. We can't even predict what kind of innovation is possible tomorrow. It's a really exciting time. I would say it's also a very competitive place, and Indians and U.S. Citizens have been able to compete very well in this global marketplace through education, through training, through skills, and that's really what we have to keep ensuring, that Indian citizens, that American citizens are keeping pace with the changes that are occurring in this century, not only just kind of watching the change in front of them, but can be the architects of that change as well.
Well, the world has changed quite a lot, and when President Obama made his first visit, you all did announce support for India's permanent seat on the UN Security Council. How does the U.S. view, changing the architecture, the global architecture of these big institutions?
Well, I think it's really important. I think, when we just talk about India specifically, we're very supportive of India's rise as a global power. We want India to be a global strategic, political, economic power. And we also agree that requires India to have a role in international institutions that is commensurate with their new global role. And that's why the president was so forceful and committed about India having a seat on a reformed UN Security Council, about India playing a key role in the G20, about India having a broader role across Asia. So look, we're going to continue to work with our Indian partners to make sure that the institutions work not only for the countries that may have been the global powers 50 or 60 years ago, but that the institutions work for the rising powers as well.
So it's been a year since you've taken office, and a year since President Obama was the chief guest at our Republic Day in 2015. And you've described this 1 year as the year of consequences in the India relationship, India-US relationship. So what is the road ahead? If that was the year of consequences, what's 2016? It's also an election year in the US.
I've heard that.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I think we have to continue to just deepen and broaden and build the relationship at all the different levels. I have said to people that if you look back in our bilateral relations over the last 60 plus years, that 2015 would be right up there as one of the strongest years that we've ever had. And we're very proud of that. That took decades of work on both sides. But we've come together. If we've taken two tracks that were independent before, whether it was on economics or security or trade, those tracks have now converged and are converging. And what we have to do is to make sure we continue to build upon that. So broadening our cooperation across Asia, building on that two-way trade number to get to the 500 billion, further developing our clean energy and civil nuclear cooperation, continuing to ensure American and Indian students are studying in each other's countries, continuing to do science and space, health cooperation, working on the next global health challenge, battling cancer, battling tuberculosis. Those are the kinds of things we're actually working on a day-to-day basis that would really surprise people. But we're going to do much more of that in the year ahead, I assure you. And
at the public diplomacy level, people-to-people initiatives, now everyone is connected, contacting each other. Is that really helping the relationship? And is this relationship, does it have bipartisan support?
Oh, there's no question it has bipartisan support. And what I've been saying is I think it's almost a nonpartisan issue now that the U.S.-India relationship is one of the foremost top foreign policy priorities for the United States, to cultivate it, to build it, to really take care of it, and to ensure that we are a best partner of India. That's what the president wanted. I firmly believe that whoever comes into office, whoever controls the Congress, will feel the same way. That's the trajectory we're on.
Ambassador Richard Verma, thank you very much for being with us on Candid Conversation.
Thank you.
The way the visit from President Obama at Republic Day, but also working with the